Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Reign of Troy Radio, episode 445, coming to you on Wednesday, September 14th, ahead of the Week 3 matchup between the USC Trojans and the 1-1 Fresno State Bulldogs at the Coliseum. It's another interstate rivalry of sorts against USC's G5, what do you say, pesky in-state foe? Perhaps. I think that works. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at Reign of Troy, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Reign of Troy. I'm your host, Michael Castillo, joined along with my co-host here in the Reign of Troy studio, who you can follow on Twitter at Penguin of Troy, Elisa Deratola.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, and I'm your host, Michael Castillo, who you can follow at MichaelCastFS. We need to fix the intro.
Yeah, we've done
It's
it.
gotten a little clunky.
We've done it one way for so long, and then sort of been adding and removing and changing elements that, maybe we need to get together and script it.
A little bit. Anyways, thanks for joining us here, whether you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever in the world you're listening to us, or if you're catching us live here on YouTube. There's a bunch of you guys already in the chat. What's up to Steven, Tim, Josh has been around here already, a bunch of people in the chat. If you are watching us on YouTube, be sure to tune in, ask your questions, throw up your fight-ons from Manford, and subscribe and like the channel. It helps grow the show in a million different ways. And so do new reviews on Apple Podcasts. And Alicia, we got a new one. We got a new one last week, and I don't think we read it already.
Yeah, we got 5 stars from 28 Pitch. Great show. Alicia and Michael combine the chemistry of Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling with the spot-on analysis of Trojan football. Got us through the twin pandemics of Helton and COVID. Fight on. So
there you go.
Thank you, 28 Pitch. That's a big compliment to be compared to the chemistry between Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling,
is
compared
it a La La Land reference?
I think so, which I haven't
seen. Yeah.
But also, Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling are both awesome, so any chance I get to be compared, I will compare. Also, just some as a quick aside, hi Charlotte, hi Elizabeth.
Hey. Yeah. Anyways, Emma Stone, part of the best for me, the best comedy of the 2000s, the aughts, or as the Brits would say, the noughties, which is Superbad.
She's great in Superbad. Mm-hmm. She's great in Easy A. She's great in everything. Let's be honest. She's literally great in everything. So,
yeah, 100%. All right, Alicia, one of the things that we're super excited about right now here on YouTube is that we've sort of unlocked, as little inside baseball, the way YouTube works. As you progress, you start to unlock cool features. One of the things we've unlocked is the community aspect of YouTube. So over on our YouTube channel, you can join us and get to see the community page where we'll be posting things, updates, polls, all that stuff, and get you guys involved into the show. As always, all the Rotbots having their say. We put up a poll today. Where would you rank Lincoln Riley's USC Trojans after 2 games? Playoff team? Top 10? Top 15? Or below the 15? The top 15? Or outside of the top 15? However you want to word that. 15% said USC is a playoff team. 64 said SC should be a top 10 team, which they are. They're currently ranked 7th in the AP poll. And 19% said top 15. Only 2% had the Trojans outside the top 15.
Yeah, and I agree with the audience there. I think you rank USC as a top 10, and we talked about this in the last episode. A lot of that has to do with, if you're not ranking them in the top 10, then who are you ranking in the top 10? And that is the biggest problem with this with a ranking after 2 weeks, when half of the teams have played nobody and the other half have played a good team, and thus they all have losses, and everybody else, it's just no comparisons.
Yeah. Polls are interesting because they're multidimensional. Like, we like to think of them as just a label. Like, we know what a number 1 team looks like. We think we know what a number 10 team looks like, right? Like, You can kind of imagine these things. But the reality is that number 10 means that there's only 9 teams better than you.
Yeah.
And so that number 10 team doesn't actually mean anything. It's that, are there 9 teams better than you? Are there, 121 worse than you?
Yeah.
So, and that question is always difficult. That's the one that makes it hard to put together all of these things. So, before we get into talking about USC and Fresno State, if you're watching us here on YouTube, be sure to pop in your questions throughout the episode, and we'll tabulate those and get them into the mailbag here as we wrap this thing up towards the end. Alicia, let's just get right into it. It's USC and Fresno State week. The Trojans and the Bulldogs have met for a bunch of classics. Of course, there's the Freedom Bowl back in the early 90s, which we don't have to talk about. And then there's the infamous 2005 game, USC winning 50-42. Reggie Bush's, stamp on the Heisman Trophy, which is interesting because SC just shared highlights of that game, and that those highlights always go viral, right? But SC shared highlights of the game themselves, which they can do now that Reggie Bush is back into the fold as he's been for the last 2 years. But it got me thinking, you know what time and channel that game was on?
That was on Versus, wasn't it?
No.
It was a
7:30 kickoff.
It was a late kick.
Yes.
Because I missed the kickoff because I was like doing errands with my mom or something after school. It was a Saturday. So I was doing errands with my mom or something. We got home and it was dark. So it had to be like after 8:00. And maybe not that far after, but I know I missed the start of the game. That's all I remember.
So I just pulled up the Wikipedia page. Technically 7:15.
There you
go. Start on a Saturday night on Fox Sports Net.
Fox Sports Net. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically the equivalent of like an FS1 game today would probably be like a Fox Sports Net game.
Yeah.
Back at the time, your Fox Sports Net games were sort of like third tier, where you'd see your games on, like the Pac-12 had so many games on FSN where it was similar to the Pac-12 network. Today, that game would absolutely be probably on the Pac-12 network if it was in late November in the same situation. Clearly, it's not now. And this week, SC plays Fresno State on Big Fox, which is crazy. Complete turnaround from next week's game against Oregon State, which is going to be on the Pac-12 network. But yeah, it just got me thinking how everyone correctly agrees that that's Reggie Bush's Heisman moment. And it was a moment or a TV broadcast that was a little hidden, but that's all right.
I mean, and this is not a new complaint from USC fans. Like, I think this has been a complaint that USC games were often and are often hidden. And that is partly, and we've always argued this, like that is partly just the geopolitics and physics of a round Earth that has different time zones.
Technically oblong.
An oblong Earth that has different time zones. And so naturally, we always say that the teams on the East Coast are kicking at 8:00 all the time. Like that's when our 5:00 primetime kickoffs are at 8 p.m.
Well, the Midwest teams kick off at 11 a.m. all the time.
Yeah. So like it's just part of that. But at the same time, it is a disadvantage that USC has that marquee games can get shuffled to that late. The advantage that USC has, which could come into play certainly this year, this game might have come into play with the Stanford game, although it wasn't as late of a kick, is that you can hide your sins a little bit more easy if people aren't watching your full games and all they see is the highlight package of you scoring 1 million touchdowns.
Well, the other thing, though, I think when you're SC and in 2005 at the peak of your powers, right? It doesn't matter what time your games are. People are going to tune in. Yeah. I think of boxing events. What time are heavyweight boxing fights? At like 10:30, right? Yeah. 10:30 Vegas time, which is of course our time. Like Nobody cares. Why? Because everyone's tuning in no matter what.
You're at least, and this is why if USC gets off to
If the demand is there,
hot start here, like, if Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison are going to put on a show, people are going to watch. Reggie Bush is going to put on a show, people are going to watch at least the first half, which is, again, if USC has a game that is identical to the Stanford game this week with a 7:30 kickoff, then like you can bank on people just ranking USC based on that first half. Like, oh my gosh.
Well, the first half would be, people would go to sleep after the first half.
You wouldn't stick around. So,
there's
always pluses and minuses. It happens. But either way, I like a late kick. I obviously don't have kids and I'm not going to the Coliseum anymore, but I loved a 7:30 kick. There's something about the Coliseum under the lights and just the feeling of especially now, like a later September evening when it cools down and you're just like, there's that feeling.
I don't think it's cooled down just yet. Just saying.
It's starting to cool down in the evenings, though. It's not like 92 degrees at 10 o'clock. So that makes a big difference. And it's nice.
All right. Well, the other battles between USC and Fresno State, recently, of course, the 2013 Vegas Bowl. SC got a huge dominant win in that one, sort of unexpected. SC in 2013 sort of turned things around with Coach O, but Coach O famously walks out on the team, quits right before the bowl game. Clay Helton is appointed as the interim head coach, and that was a Fresno State team that was really damn good with Derek Carr. That team could have scored 1 billion points, right? And what they do, SC sort of throttled them. Was it 38-20, I think, but for a long time it was like 38-7 at one point or something like that. So
yeah,
big win for SC there. They opened the 2014 season against Fresno State and get a big win in Sark's first game, which he debuts the Sark spread offense, and that was a big win for SC. That first drive I remember being a big deal. Darius Rogers 3 first downs on third down. It was like 15 plays and like 80 yards or something like that.
Scripted Sark drives.
Thing of beauty.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Just
it can be.
Everything after that, Sark, calm down. But the first scripted, yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, the 2019 game, the first game of the season, the infamous, what would you say? What was that from JT Daniels? Well, it was a quarter in which JT Daniels nearly won the Heisman after the first quarter in the Graham Harrell offense.
And then
had a sputtery second quarter, got hurt, and tore his ACL, was out for the season.
Yeah.
And then Keaton Slovis came in and had what you would expect for a true freshman in his very first game. And SC held on with the big pick later in the game with Isaiah Polamalu with the pick in the end zone. So that was 2019. Here we are in 2022. USC going into a game with a number 7 ranking. The Fresno State Bulldogs coming off a heartbreaking loss at home in Fresno to Oregon State. The Oregon State Beavers of the Trojans, of course, will play next week. This is a Fresno State team that is good. Jeff Tedford back at the helm of the Bulldogs. We know that he went there a few years ago, ultimately left for health reasons, retired. He has come back to replace Kalen DeBoer, who was promoted from within to be the Fresno State head coach. In the middle of that, Kalen DeBoer now up in Seattle at UW. This is a team to be reckoned with. They are the Fresno State that you remember back from the Pat Hill days. They are the team that is not afraid of anybody. Jake Haener with some great quotes this week. We talked about it earlier in the Stanford Fallout episode. Jake Haener making comments about how little Jake Haener wasn't tall enough and couldn't get a scholarship.
It didn't have enough stars next to his name.
Yeah. Which, if you're Fresno State, that's what you want. You want the chip on their shoulder. You want to drive down the 99 and feel like you got something to prove. And USC as a top 7 team surely would fit that bill of who you want to do some damage to. Let's talk about the Fresno State Bulldogs on offense. Of course, led by quarterback Jake Haener. Started his career at Washington. Back in Fresno State for another year. Last year, 4,000 yards through the air, 33 touchdowns, 9 picks. Against Oregon State, had a big game, 30 of 46, 360 yards through the air, only 1 TD, no interceptions though. So a pretty clean game from him on that side of things. Jordan Mims in the backfield, and he's got a receiving core of Nick Remeggio, Jalen Moreno Cropper. And Cropper, I remember from the UCLA game last year too. Him and Hainer were just tremendous on that last drive to beat, really the last 2 drives to beat UCLA.
Yeah, and Cropper added the hyphen to his name, so now he's Moreno Cropper. Yeah. So same human though.
Which defeats the purpose of the word Cropper. Cropper means shorter.
I know. It's just, they don't think of these things.
Yeah, like
when they come up with a deeply personal reason to add a hyphen to their name. And then also Nick Remigio was Cal transfer, so he was a guy that USC is familiar with, and he had a huge game against Oregon State last week with 100 yards receiving. So
yeah,
it's an interesting receiving core. There are weapons here, and the quarterback is, I think Jake Haener is the quarterback I'm most excited to see come to the Coliseum since.
I'm interested of your answer.
I can't think. I haven't been excited about quarterbacks coming to the Coliseum in recent years. So it's been a while. It's been years. Since Chucky Keaton.
I was going to say, what are you going to say, Chucky Keaton? No.
I want to curse him the way we cursed Chucky Keaton.
Oh my God.
Talked him up all week, and then
Chucky Keaton might be the most, in the history of college football, the most fun quarterback to talk about. But then every time you watch them, you're like, what was I saying?
Why were we hyping?
What were we doing there? Yeah. I don't know. SC has played their fair share of good quarterbacks. Some that I will add to that list. Justin Herbert coming to the Coliseum a couple of times, 2019 and 20. There's been many. We can talk about those a different day. But the other key performer to mention here on the Bulldog offense is probably the offensive lineman with the best name in college football, Dante Bull. That is who you need out blocking for you, a literal bull, Dante Bull, preseason All-Mountain West selection there. This is an offense that you can expect to score a lot of points. They were 26th in scoring offense, 33.4 points per game, 27th in SP plus on the offensive side of the ball, 14th in total offense. And really you look back at the game last week against Oregon State, the one that we really kind of can talk about here because that was their only opponent against an FBS opponent. They played Cal Poly in week 1. Don't care about Cal Poly. We care about the Oregon State game.
I think the only thing you draw from the Cal Poly game, potentially, and I'm not even sure you can, they probably should have beat Cal Poly better than they did. It was a weird game, apparently. I don't know. I don't draw anything from those games. So.
I think when you're Fresno State and you play Cal Poly, Oregon State, and SC, literally give no thought to what happens against Cal Poly.
Yeah. So
none.
Yeah,
win the game. That's all that matters.
I mean, and there's a reason on our rundown we have all of our stats. The stats we're looking at are last year's stats and not season stats to date. We're looking at just Oregon State stats because, again, we don't.
Right.
You just don't include the score, the stats against FCS teams.
Yeah, Kenny in the chat says Khalil Tate ?
Yes,
Khalil Tate's a good pull here in multiple ways because not only was Khalil Tate the all-time greatest October quarterback in the history of football back in 2017. And SC and Arizona played an epic game in 2017. But you look at the same kind of chip on the shoulder thing with Khalil Tate.
Yeah.
Coming out of Sarah, didn't get the looks from SC to play quarterback.
Yeah.
He got looks to be an athlete. He didn't want to be an athlete. And for the USC perspective, they had other quarterbacks in line at the time, so it would make sense that they weren't going to go that route. But if you're Khalil Tate, that doesn't matter. You obviously should take that and run with that chip on your shoulder. And Jake Haener, the same thing. Even if it's justified that SC looked at the other, quarterbacks, if you're Jake Haener, you should be offended because you should believe in yourself more than anybody else. So it all checks out, and it is similar to Khalil Tate in that sense.
And it checks out too because I'm similarly scared of Jake Haener. Like Khalil Tate scared me because he's just a playmaker. Like, somehow, some way he's going to make a play. And that's my fear with Jake Haener is the sense of, is he the best quarterback that USC is going to face this year? I don't know if I would say that just in terms of like pure ability, but in terms of
I think
heart
DTR is
and
probably
grit,
the guy there.
Yeah, but like the question of, is he the most competitive quarterback that USC will face this year? I would put him in that cat. Like, I will never forget watching him against UCLA. That was the gutsiest performance that I've seen from a quarterback.
I wish it was a bowl game because then we'd stop seeing Byron Leftwich getting, carried down the field.
Yeah.
As a Jags fan, I don't need to see that anymore. You know what I mean? Like the Jake Haener drive last year was so much better.
Well, the Jake Haener thing was just absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen it before this game, go find the highlights or go watch that drive. It's probably got to be somewhere on YouTube.
Yeah. He takes a shot to the ribs, and you could tell that he has nothing. He's practically puking up blood on the sideline the whole bit.
Yeah. So that's that's what I think is going to be fascinating here is the sort of the push and pull between. I think I fear Fresno State because I respect Fresno State, the program. I respect Jeff Tedford, the coach. I respect the quarterback. I respect their playmakers. Do I think they're a better team than USC? No. I think on paper you have there's a reason that USC is favored in this game by as much as they are, all of that kind of stuff. But if you were ever going to go into a game saying, don't trust what's on paper too much because the game is played on the field for a reason, and will matters and know-how matters and togetherness matters, and that's what everything about this Fresno State team. Are they perfect? No, but they were 10-3 last year, and they have all of this going for them. And I think that it's a danger team that you don't want to take lightly.
I think the thing here to play up to, and Steve in the chat says that our defense is very vulnerable. That's exactly it. I think that for Fresno State, this is a matchup that you kind of like.
Yes.
No team is going to match up against USC's offense at this point. SC's offense looks like, top 1 or 2 in the country. But defensively, you got to be sort of licking your chops because SC was gassed on the ground at times against Rice, and really for most of the game, practically all the game against Stanford, right? And Stanford was able to move the field in a balanced way. I think that's what Fresno State's going to want to do, be balanced, throw the ball a little bit more. We know that Jeff Tedford is extremely experienced. Mm-hmm. Jeff Tedford is someone who has played SC a million times and been a pesky opponent plenty of those times, right? Yeah. So he knows what it's like to play at the Coliseum. Fresno State's not going to be scared at all. And then you just add in the fact that this is an early game in a time where the defense is trying to fix things out and gel. And this is a team that Fresno State is a team who's capable of scoring 30, 35 points, maybe more than that on this defense because SC clearly has been susceptible through 2 weeks. And if you do that and you force a shootout, then it's on the offense to do their part. And while I trust USC's offense to score 30, 35, 40 points, there's always the time that they don't if they run into, an error or 2 or 3 or 4.
Well, I mean, this isn't I wouldn't call this an elite defense by any stretch, but they are a competent defense. They're in 2021, they were 20th in scoring defense, 32nd in total defense, 34th in yards per play, 24th in rushing defense, 26th in rushing yards per carry, 58th in passing defense, 24th in defensive passer rating. So it's a top half of college football defense. It's a defense that, like I said, it's not up there with the great defenses in the country, but they are not a bad defense the way that you could look at Stanford and Rice and say, well, neither of these teams are particularly competitive on defense. So this will be the first test for USC's offense because they won't be able to just easily, well, you have to think like they won't, I don't think it'll be quite as hot knife through butter for this offense against this defense as you could make it against Rice and Stanford, certainly early in the game. I think that Fresno State has a chance to put up more of a fight. The question that USC's offense needs to answer right now is, can they be hot knife through butter through even average, decent defenses? Or is it just the bad ones that are going to be like, well, we're going to put up 35 points on you in the blink of an eye?
Right. Well, Fresno State's defense is the first team SC has played this year, in which we don't, in the preview, aren't talking about a whole bunch of rankings in the hundreds, right?
Yeah.
Rice, they were like 120 something against the pass last year. Stanford, a lot of their defensive rankings last year were in the hundreds. They weren't a good defensive team. And Fresno State is not one of those teams. However, Fresno State is a G5. Them being one of the top 2 teams in the Mountain West certainly makes it a little bit easier to have better stats that way. So it makes it a little bit harder to compare, say, against Stanford, who's playing against better teams because they're in the Pac-12. But still, I would say that Fresno State is going to be, of the 3 teams that USC has played, probably the best defense of the 3. Mind you, this is still week 3. This is more time for USC to gel on offense. And they've already done it. Already done it. We saw it last week against Stanford, especially in that first half. Both games they've scored on the first 5 drives. I feel pretty confident in saying that SC is going to score their fair share of points. It's going to be a matter of doing it for 60 minutes. And if the defense, unless the defense takes a step forward, you're going to maybe have to do that for 60 minutes because we've seen the defense be susceptible through a couple of weeks so far.
Yeah, well, and like when I say that Fresno might have a chance to slow this USC offense down, I mean like they might have a chance to keep this USC offense from scoring 40 points.
Sure.
I think you peg USC for at least 35 here and run with it. But
look at SC last week, right? You can say that Stanford got the better of Stanford's defense. You can spin the narrative.
Yeah.
I don't believe this narrative, but you can spin the narrative that Stanford's defense slowed USC down in the second half after making a bunch of halftime adjustments. Again, I don't believe that. You could say that though. And held SC to 41 points. But if 41 points is going to be the one where you have a, quote, bad half, that tells you how potent your offense actually is.
Yeah. And so, but the thing that I think is really going to be telling here is not necessarily, obviously USC needs to put up points here. There's no question about that. It's not necessarily the number of points. For me, it's the timing of points.
Yeah.
Because it will be a game where I think USC needs to manage their defense through it. And the more we're going to keep talking about, like the more run support that you give the defense, the more you're going to give them a chance to have the second half that they did. It was sort of the fourth quarter that they did where they were like, okay, no, we're not going to let you guys get any closer. We're going to sack you a bunch of times now. So it's really about get your cushion as quickly as possible. When your defense gets a stop, you must score. When your defense gets a turnover, you must capitalize on it and make sure that the defense is being supported in every way possible. Obviously, you want to score on every drive. I'm not going to ask that of USC's offense. It's not fair. But like the timing that you're able to counter move everything that Fresno State does on offense could be the key to this game. I mean, you don't want a back and forth shootout. That puts pressure on everybody.
Yeah.
But I think that if USC can get what?
I was just saying, it puts pressure on everybody. That's the crazy thing about last week. Last week would have been a shootout if they didn't get the turnovers.
Yes, they got the turnovers.
Yeah. And that you get I feel like a broken record. That you finish off your drives and you prevent the other team from finishing off your drives. Just that little switch, even with the exact same yardage gained on both sides, completely changes the power dynamic of a football game.
Yeah, and that's something I'm going to talk about. I mean, we'll talk about it later, or we can talk about it now. When I say like what this game is going to come down to, um, in the end, it's going to be those turnovers. It's going to be red zone percentages. To me, that's the key.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can go out of order here, or
Well,
or talk about this defense a little bit.
let's talk about Fresno State's defense really quick before we get back to the red zone stuff, because I want to touch on that. A couple of key players to mention: Evan Williams, last year for the Bulldogs, led the team with 92 tackles. Had a hell of a game against Oregon State: 9 tackles, tackle for loss, a PBU. He is going to be all over the place. Those numbers feel like very Talanoa Hufanga-esque,
Yeah,
right? Like just
yeah.
everywhere.
Oh, it was 92 tackles, and the next top tackler had like 62. So
Yeah.
it was that.
Insane. I mean,
Yeah.
that you're getting to the third level, though, and having to make all the tackles, problematic.
Yeah.
But if you're going to, be involved for 3 PBUs and tackle for loss on top of that, that's Hufanga style stuff right there.
Yeah.
There's a certain linebacker named Raymond Scott. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Against Oregon State, 4 tackles and a sack. Hold on. I got this little handy note here. It says that Raymond Scott, yes, 2-time CIF state champion from Narbonne High School.
Mm-hmm. Where have we heard that before?
I don't know where we've heard that before. Transfer from a little Methodist college in Los Angeles called University of Southern California. Oh, he's a former SC guy.
Mm-hmm. Former SC guy who played linebacker and safety, and then linebacker again,
Bounced
and then
around a
safety
little bit.
again, and they just never found a spot for him.
Yeah, and he had a good game last week against Oregon State. Good for him. More power to him. We'll see what he can do with the Dogs up there.
Another player with chip on shoulder. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And linebacker Lavelle Bailey, 9 tackles against the Beavers last week, and a couple of defensive ends in Perales and Johnson that you could expect to be potentially a problem on the ends. In a week in which USC is sort of, per all the reports, we're not at practice. We're not talking about injuries in that sense, but Cortland Ford might not be 100%.
Yeah, and this is something that Lincoln Riley talked about at practice, so it's fair game as far as the injuries go, that he is going to sort of be I'm calling it like babied through the week, not really practicing while they let him try to get right in terms of health. So Bobby Haskins, come on down.
Yeah. This is why you have Bobby Haskins there,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. But it could be an interesting week because Bobby Haskins is coming back from his own injury. Cortland Ford dealing with an injury. So the left tackle spot could be, the matchup to watch here, knowing that that Stanford does. I keep saying Stanford. The Fresno State does have a couple of good DEs that they can throw out there and try to get the better of a sort of a area for the Bulldogs to target.
Yeah.
Go after the guy with injury. On the flip side, if I'm USC and I see that depth chart and I see a freshman starting at DT right there in the middle of that defensive line, I too am going after a particular area. Like, so there's a chess match here that I think
Tony Day. Travis Day.
Yeah, if USC can get that run game going and really let Dye and Austin Jones and those guys feast, because Fresno State might be a little bit vulnerable in the center of their defense. I think you there's some push and pull here, so that's another thing to watch.
Yeah, 100%. Last thing to discuss before we go to over under in our little rundown here. Our like 8-page rundown that we write for every episode. We have a little thing that says the case for USC, for why USC can/should, whatever word you want to put in there, win on Saturday. You wrote that it all comes down to red zone efficiency. Fresno State's red zone offense was good last year, ranking 30th in scoring percentage at 88.24%, 22nd in TD percentage, holding opponents to just 68%.
No. That's their offense.
Sorry, that's their offense.
Yeah.
Look at me, can't read.
They scored touchdowns 68.63% of the time. That's 22nd.
Yeah.
in the country.
This is the problem with live doing things live. You can't just reread it.
I'll take over from here.
Go for it.
On the flip side, Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma offense was first in scoring percentage.
Yeah.
Red zone score percentage at 96.77%, and second in the country in touchdown percentage in the red zone at 75.81%.
Can I push back on that slightly? I noticed something today that like jarred me. You know, SC's like 100 and something in red zone offense.
Yes, because they have missed field goals in the red zone. So their scoring percentage.
I mean, small sample size, 2 games.
Yes, the scoring percentage is not great, but I think that those are not necessarily great representations. Also, USC has scored a couple of long touchdowns that they haven't necessarily needed to get into the red zone. But the point being, Lincoln Riley is good in the red zone. We know this about his offense. He's good in the red zone. Fresno State is also decent in the red zone, but if we're talking about levels, we're talking about a Fresno State that can be good in the red zone and a USC that can be great in the red zone. And if you're talking about who is going to win a game, that I think you and I think, if it's not a shootout, will be a back and forth affair that will come down to efficiency. And that, I think, is the other element of my case for USC, and that's turnovers. Again, drive efficiency. Are you getting into the red zone, and are you scoring touchdowns instead of field goals? Make a note here, Fresno State settled for field goals 4 out of the 6 times they got into the red zone against Oregon State.
Yeah.
You can't settle for field goals.
Let them do that again.
Against this team. And that is like the MO of USC's defense right now. Drive, get in the red zone, and then we'll create something that stops you from scoring a touchdown in the red zone more often than not.
That's what's so good about USC's offense right now is like the pressure that you're putting on these opponents is score 7 points or you're screwed.
Yeah.
And look at Stanford. When you didn't score 7 points, you got lost
behind,
because of it.
Yeah, Stanford got behind in that game 41-14 because they weren't scoring when they got into the red zone.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Which brings me to the second element of this large sort of what it all come down to case. Turnovers. The difference between USC's defense being effective in the last 2 games and an absolute dumpster fire is turnovers. USC is +8. They have not had a turnover yet, and they have created 8 turnovers in 2 games. By contrast, and this is what's really interesting to me, Fresno State has a nice round 0 on their turnover margin.
Well, the zeros everywhere.
Yeah, zeros are everywhere because they have not had a turnover. Good. They have not created a turnover. Not so good. And that is going to be the question. That's going to be the give and take that we see in this game. Who has the turnovers? Who capitalizes on the turnovers? Who makes the mistake? And that's going to be the question for USC's offense. Protect the ball. And the question for Fresno's offense is protect the ball. So that's what it'll come down to. Red zone efficiency and turnovers.
100%. All right, let's get to the over-under where there may be mentions of those things. Maybe. We'll see. All right, over-under. I need a big week. Alicia, you're beating me. You have a record of 11-7. I'm not too fond of that. I'm at 8-10. So I need a big week. So give me some easy lines to win on. What's your first one?
We'll see. Speaking of red zone, I've got 66.6% USC's red zone scoring defense. So USC has a 66.6% red zone scoring defense so far this season. Fresno State this season is 83.33% in their scoring defense, but they were 33.3% scoring touchdowns in the red zone versus Fresno State. So 66.6%. Will USC's defense...
You say scoring defense.
I am going...
You're specifically saying scoring defense.
I am going with scoring defense.
Okay.
Just to keep it simpler, I probably should make it touchdown, but
no, you said scoring. That's fair. I think that it's difficult either way. I'm going to take the. This is for Fresno State, right? Because this is USC's defense. So this is
USC's
Fresno State's
defense against Fresno State's offense. Yes.
Okay. So let's just make it Fresno State's offense. Let's be clearer.
Okay.
I'm going to take the over. The reason being, I think, if SC forces field goals, you can feel really good about that, but that doesn't mean that affects the scoring defense. Because if you settle for, if SC holds Fresno State to nothing but field goals and they just hit field goals, their scoring defense, scoring rate can still be 100%, even though they're scoring field goals instead of TDs. So I like the idea of SC holding in the field goals over TDs, especially after last week. But I'm not going to take the scoring defense all told, because that means that SC is forcing turnovers and turnovers in the red zone, and there's a little too many ifs there.
The question I would have is,
even though they've been doing it,
does Fresno State know that they can't settle for field goals in this game?
That's a good point. Maybe Tedford wants to dial it up, but also at the same time, I think that if anyone is going to be cool and calm in that situation, it's going to be Tedford.
Yeah.
Tedford's not scared of the Coliseum.
Yeah.
Next, first one for me. Over under 1.5 Fresno State turnovers for all the reasons you talked about. SC has forced 8 turnovers in 2 games, third most among FBS opponents who have played 2 games. +4 turnover margin per game, which is tops in the FBS. And of course, Fresno State has not turned the ball over once. Over under 1.5 Bulldog turnovers.
I am purely going off of the incomprehensible, unpredictable nature of turnovers, and I'm going with the under here. I think that I would feel comfortable with saying that USC can force a turnover against Fresno State, but to get 2 is more than I'm willing to bet on in this case.
Okay.
Jake Haener is pretty good at protecting the football. Fresno State has a pretty decent receiving core. The running backs, I don't know that I looked at fumble numbers for them, but I don't think they're particularly unreliable. I think that USC in the first 2 weeks did a hell of a job getting the turnovers that they did.
Yeah.
But there's a reason Bill Connolly calls it turnover luck. So eventually,
one of them was tipped early on.
I just don't think that you can bet on 2 as opposed to 1 or 0.
Yeah, as Gen Z would say, bet. Yeah, bet.
I'm going to pretend that I understood that.
On God, yeah.
On sure. God, yeah.
No cap. All right. What's your next one?
All right, I'm going with 3.5 USC sacks. So USC has had way more sacks than I have perceived this defense getting. They had 4 against Rice, 5 against Stanford. They have 9 this season. That's a lot of sacks in 2 games. And it's weird because I don't think USC's pass rush has been very good when they needed it to be. So it's just a very strange situation to be in from an analysis perspective. Fresno State's weird. They allowed 1 sack versus Oregon State, which leads me to believe that they gave up 3 sacks to Cal Poly because they have 4 sacks allowed this season. So that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But we know USC is an attacking defense. We know they're going to try and get after Jake Haener. As much as he is a bulldog-hearted human, he is not I don't know that we would categorize him as dual threat. He's mobile. He is a scrambler, but he's not
he's dual threat like Slovis is dual threat.
Yeah.
In which I think Slovis was willing to, if the pocket took 30 seconds, he might be willing to run a little bit, especially as Slovis has got older. He's been less willing to run out of the pocket, but yes.
Yeah. So I'm going with a little bit of a high line here at 3.5 for USC sacks. Will they keep reeling him in?
3.5 is just so high.
It is,
It
yeah.
is so high. Like, you can get 3 sacks, and I can think
Still
that
feel
was a
it's a good
good,
game.
productive day in terms of getting pressure.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm going to take the under. But not because I'm doubting this USC defense. I kind of expect the defense to take a step forward this week, even if it is a tougher opponent. Having said that, yeah, 3.5 is just a lot.
Yep. I struggled mightily with
Yeah.
setting that line, to be honest.
All right. My second one, over under 165.5 rushing yards for Fresno State. 165.5 through 2 games. The Dogs are averaging 152, 172 against Cal Poly, 132 against the Beavs last week. SC is allowing 183 per game. Can they hold the Bulldogs to 165.5?
I'm taking the over here. Apologies to USC's defense, but I will take the over on all of these questions about the defense until they prove that that's not the smart move anymore.
Yeah.
I think that Fresno State has a running back that they are willing to feed. They gave Mims 21 carries last game. And I think that just based on the track record through the first 2 games of the rush defense, it has not been good enough. So give me that over.
Yeah, Tedford isn't stupid,
Yeah.
right? Like he's gonna force SC to sort of stop the run. So I could see that. What's your last one?
45.5 points for USC. Another high line. Fresno State gave up 40 points to Boise State last year in the one blowout that they suffered. The last time they allowed more than that in a game was 49 points to New Mexico in 2020. USC's offense
really funny to me. I'll
is
tell you in a
stupid good. Will they score more than 45 points?
So it's funny to me that you looked this up, because I looked up when I was making my score prediction, which I've already written into the little rundown doc here. I was looking up the number of the points that Fresno State tends to give up in these types of games.
Yeah.
And I know they've gone through a coaching transition to and from Tedford, but really it's a lot of the same guys, right? They haven't given up more than 40 to a opponent in the more than 40 to a Power 5 opponent since 2017. 41 to Alabama, and I think it was 49 or 48 to Washington. Since then, all their games have been like in the 30s. I gotta take the under here, not because I believe in SC, and this is not a doubt on USC's ability to score those points. I just kind of see this game playing out on the scoreline sort of similarly to last week, but I don't want to give away my prediction too quickly, even though I know I just did.
So I know I set that line too high, but honestly, I think I wanted to bait you into taking the under.
Okay.
Because I think this could end up being a shootout where everyone scores 45 points. So
okay,
yeah.
All right. I mean, it is Pac-12 after dark.
Yeah,
things
happen.
Could get nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
My last one. I got to go back to third downs. You know, I love talking about third downs.
Oh yeah.
9.5 third down attempts for USC. 9.5. 2 games SC has played. They had 7 against Rice, 8 against Stanford. In the history of CFBstats.com, USC has never done that in back-to-back games. That goes back to 2009. That's as far back as that stat goes. That you can look it up. I looked at a couple other places and I couldn't find it, and I'm not going to go through game notes and like all that stuff. It'll take forever. So we'll just say for the foreseeable thing, it's hard to see when SC has done that most recently. However, Lincoln Riley did it recently last year. He had a game in which they had 6 third down attempts against Texas Tech at home, followed by 9 on the road at Baylor, a top 10 Baylor team at the time, followed by 10, just barely missed it, against Iowa State. Oregon State against Fresno State had 10 last week. 10, just barely into the double digits. 9.5 the line here for third down attempts for USC? 9.5. Over under.
I have to go over. I have to go over. I think this is gonna be I think it's gonna be a shootout. So I have to go over. I have to think that there will be enough drives, enough possessions, enough situations where you are in a third down situation, and they will add up.
Okay, I kind of like this. I like that. I like having the under there. I think SC could have 9.
I think
And
they
I never
could too.
really
I mean,
like even in a shootout. That means that they're scoring a lot of points and maybe never seeing third down. Just saying. Just saying. All right, we've pulled one out of the chat here. Alex says over under 22 and a half second half points for USC. 22 and a half.
I'm going to go over on this one because, again, I think it will be a shootout, but I could get into trouble here if USC takes care of business really early in the first half and doesn't need to score in the second half. So we'll see. I'm going over.
I'll take the under. I think SC front loads their points again first half.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's get into the predictions. Bill Connolly's metrics has SC winning 33-26. Vegas has the Trojans as of right in this rundown. 12.5-point favorites with an over-under of 74. When you do the math, I like weirdly doing the math. What does that mean? 12.5 and 74? Like basically a score of 43-31. Doesn't sound crazy to me. What do you got?
Almost right on that. I got 44-35.
SC winning?
SC wins. I think that USC will have enough firepower here to overcome Fresno State. I think the Coliseum will be a factor here in terms of just G'ing up this team, and I think critically G'ing up the defense when they need it. But I think Fresno State's going to score. So, yeah, 44-35.
All right. I'm taking SC 41, Fresno State 24.
Be a hell of a victory to me if USC can hold Fresno State to 24 points. Not going to lie.
41-24 is how I see it. We'll see how that goes. I did say that SC would hold them to a lot of field goals. Well, that's just one field goal. So
yeah,
who knows? Maybe things get weird. But 41-24 SC winning. Let's go to the mailbag and wrap this podcast up. We'll start with a couple of preloaded questions that our pal Josh from Ohio threw in here into our YouTube stream way before we started recording. Do you think Lincoln Riley watched the game between the Beavs and Fresno State and might develop a solid plan to make quick work of Fresno State?
I think
he's watching film of every game.
I think he's watching film of every game. I think he knows how to put together an offensive game plan. I don't think the offense is going to be the question whether or not a solid plan comes into play.
I don't think the offense is going to be dictating whether it's quick work because you could have the best offensive and the game plan last week.
Yeah.
And the defense can lead the other side of the ball vulnerable. Josh also says this is jet lag from years of Hugs, Helton, and the epic amount of poor football we watched that everyone thinks Fresno are world beaters, or is everyone just downing Lincoln Riley's ability to win? I don't think it's either one of those things.
Got nothing to do with Lincoln Riley or even USC. Fresno State has been a strong G5 program for the better part of
years.
2 decades. For a long time. They are a good football program with a good football coach, with a good quarterback, I think they are the definition to me of good, not great. They're not the Mountain West team that's going to contend for playoff, but they will always be competitive. And like I said, I think that you don't take them lightly because they have been too solid for too long.
Yeah, and it also helps that they're well coached.
Yes.
Jeff Tedford is
a good coach.
Pretty damn good coach.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the questions from the chat. Steven says Fresno State is well coached, excellent quarterback. They were up 9 and were in position to beat a very, very good Oregon State team. I was skeptical too until I watched Fresno State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Tim says Jake Haener said in his presser, "No one thinks that we can win." Is there really that kind of disrespect going on? All I've seen is a lot of concern about this game.
Well, I think USC is on upset alert again this week in sort of the national media. So I don't know that they're being disrespected, but I certainly think people assume USC will win. I mean, Vegas has USC as a 12-point favorite, so it's not. He's not wrong. He's not right. He's sort of.
There's also this inherent. I think there's certain situations where you're allowed to have a like a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And if you're Fresno State, you're more than allowed to do that. You're in the Mountain West. You look at USC as sort of like the owner of the state, and you don't like that. Most of your players probably wanted to go to SC, but couldn't because of whatever reason, right? Like, absolutely, you should feel disrespected, even if it's not going back the other way. And I don't think it's going back the other way because I think SC people do tend to respect Fresno State a lot. Let's go from a down Pinoy who says, I laughed my ass off watching Notre Dame lose to Marshall, but if we are measured against our rivals, does Notre Dame losing hurt us too, even if we beat them?
Okay. In a year when USC is contending for the playoff, then sure. I don't want to see this USC team in the playoffs, so I don't think that I'm paying too much attention to the resumes of the teams on USC's schedule. I think you play the teams that are in front of you and prove that you can win games before we start sort of calculating whether or not USC needs help in terms of resume building.
Yeah, for sure. Ordinary guy, Relique Brown availability updates. You're not going to get one. SC's not talking about those things, and he can't be necessarily reported as well.
He played against Stanford. Didn't see any reason to think that he wouldn't be available this time too.
Alex says, is the new Jeff Tedford as good as the original Jeff Tedford as the game and the hunger passed him by? I think Jeff Tedford is a prime example of someone who has reinvented himself.
Yes.
If you would have told me a decade ago, I would have said that he was on the verge of the game passing him by, but he has reinvented himself when he went to Washington, was their offensive coordinator and helped them when they were like at the playoff year with Peterson. And since going to Fresno State, I think he's been great.
Yep.
So I think he's reinvented himself. Poncho Cam says, is Lincoln Riley going to get out-coached, and can Fresno State score 50+? I don't think Lincoln Riley's going to get out-coached. I think if there's someone who's capable of doing it, I think that Jeff Tedford is probably as good as any given his experience. But I wouldn't say that Lincoln Riley is going to get out-coached. I think we need to see that to happen before we could sort of predict that thing. And Lincoln Riley deserves the benefit of the doubt for now.
You're talking about Alex Grinch getting out-coached by Jeff Tedford, if we're talking about any out-coaching.
Sure. Yeah. Josh says, who on Fresno State can actually line up and stop all of the weapons SC has?
This is the problem for every defense that USC faces. They don't have the ability to line up man-to-man to stop the weapons that USC has, which is why I'm going to continue to say that USC stops themselves in these situations with turnovers and red zone mistakes.
Yeah. Ron from LA, Lower Alabama. Question, if USC goes 10-2 and Oklahoma has the same record, will the bowl committee try to match these two teams up?
Oh, you know it. They're programming TV here, guys. But there are tie-ins and...
Well, I still think that the odds are that if SC and Oklahoma makes the playoff, they're going to be the 3 and 4 seed.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the 1 and 2.
But if they're 10-2 and we think that the playoff includes the three that the top 3 right now plus 1, let's say, I don't know, a 1-loss Clemson, as unimaginable as I think that would be. But I think a 10-2 USC and Oklahoma potentially are non-playoff teams. That
they could meet in like the Fiesta Bowl or something.
Yeah.
But if SC goes 10-2 and is in the playoff, they're going to be number 4.
Yeah.
Josh says, do you think the fans will pack the Coliseum? Yeah, I think there'll be a hell of a lot more.
They better.
It's going to be better weather. Also, I think that the people who maybe had trepidation about buying in so quickly will have seen week 1 and week 2 and will be all in on buying into this week.
Yes.
Last question. Josh says, do you think the SC team hears all the doubt everyone has that they should struggle with Fresno? And do you think they should come out with a chip on their shoulder? I don't know that people are necessarily doubting that they will struggle against Fresno. I think this is the one thing that I've sort of like looked at these things like just because Fresno State is I think a good challenge for this USC team in the position that they are in, which is an offense that is running at ninth gear and a defense that is still trying to get things going. And Fresno State became a good challenge because of that, and because we know how well coached Fresno State has been. That doesn't mean that we're doubting USC of winning this game. I think those things are very two different things. Like this is a game where the better team, the USC in this situation, is going to win this game realistically 85% of the time. And that's just how it is. Like I don't think that's doubting USC at all.
My hope would be, though, that Lincoln has the team this week reminded about the missteps in the second half offensively, make sure that they recognize and understand that they can't take a game off, they can't take prep off, they have to take everything seriously because they are not the finished article yet. They're not perfect, even on offense where they have so much firepower. They still have a lot of work to do.
Yep, absolutely. Really quick, Cam Lifestyles, does SC need an 8-man rotation to be competitive in the playoffs? Probably. SC's not there yet, and I don't think that's
certainly more than the rotation that they have now on that defensive front for sure.
Yeah. All right, we've got to make a run of it and head back and get ready for the CarCast after Saturday's game. Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Pacific on Big Fox USC and Fresno State locking horns at the Coliseum. We'll be right back here on YouTube live after the game, like 10 minutes after the game or whatever it is. We'll be here. So until then, we will see you. See ya.
See ya.